So, hi Susie. These figures show doctors are handing out more antidepressant prescriptions to teenagers. As a GP yourself, what have you noticed?
Well, I've certainly noticed that more teenagers and young adults are on antidepressants. There's definitely a rise. But antidepressant prescriptions and use are really just the tip of the iceberg in the mental health crisis in adolescence. So as a GP, we're not allowed to prescribe antidepressants. They're described by psychiatrists for people under 18. So what I'm seeing is a huge rise in general mental health problems, not just prescriptions of antidepressants. They're at the most severe end of the spectrum. I'm seeing dramatically more adolescents with problems with anxiety, depression, self-harm, eating disorders and school refusal, just to name a few of the conditions that I see every day now.
What's the reason for the rise in these conditions?
I think it's so complicated and there's so many factors involved, but certainly we've been noticing a rise in mental health problems since 2010, and lots of people have been looking into why. I'm particularly interested in the increased use of social media, smartphones and gaming since that time, and the effect that can have on adolescents, but certainly there's increased pressure, increased financial difficulties at school, rises in cyberbullying. Young people seem to be spending less time outside and face-to-face with each others, all of which can compound mental health problems, along with the pandemic, which certainly has seemed to expedite the problems that young people are already having.
Yeah, tell me more about the impact the pandemic and lockdowns have had on mental health for young people.
I think the pandemic had an absolutely devastating effect on mental health for young people. It was a prolonged period of isolation and uncertainty, and in the short term, I think it affected young people's mental health adversely. And many of them managed to pick up and get back to school and take up hobbies and other interests. But what I'm seeing is a proportion of young people who never even made it back to school after the pandemic, partly because their anxiety and they developed maybe a social phobia after a prolonged period of time at home. So there's a proportion who have really, really suffered, and then just a general decline in well-being in young people since the pandemic, that edging down of well-being. Maybe they're doing less activities, they're spending more time online, they've got an increase in their anxiety, more school refusal, and it's having a really significant impact on the well-being of our young people across the country.
What solutions are there out there for young people who are feeling depressed?
I think the most important thing for young people is to hold on to hope and to seek help. So many young people are suffering at home in silence and just don't know where to turn to. And the first thing I would say is just tell someone if you're feeling low, if you're feeling anxious, if you're struggling, tell a trusted adult, and hopefully they can signpost you or take you to your GP or find some help at school for you. And really it's about trying to do more of the things that you enjoy and are good for your well-being, however difficult that is. So I would just encourage you to get outside, do some exercise, even if that's just kicking a football around in the garden or going for a walk. Try to really increase the amount of physical activity you do and your face-to-face connections. Rather than spending time on your own, maybe invite a friend over to watch a film. Simple things can make such a difference to well-being.
Do you have any advice for parents who might have their child who's come up to them saying they're feeling depressed, or they notice something's not quite right?
I think it's really, really tough on parents. So the first thing I'd say to parents is actually look after yourself. It's incredibly difficult if you've got an adolescent struggling with their mental health. So make sure you're putting your own life jacket on, make sure you're looking after yourself, and then really seek help. Talk to other parents, talk to your child's school, talk to your GP. Again, don't suffer in silence. It's really hard to access help for parents, and I would just say be really persistent. If your child needs help, the help is out there. It's just taking the time and the effort to try and access it for your young person, but it's really, really worth it because we know that early intervention has a better outcome for young people. So if you're worried, don't be afraid to make an appointment with your GP or your school to discuss it.
And going back to the antidepressant prescriptions, because there's been this data out saying how it's now hit 1 million antidepressant prescriptions for young people. I mean, how effective would you say antidepressants are?
Antidepressants do work in moderate to severe depression alongside talking therapies. So they're not the magic answer for young people, and they have significant side effects. So certainly in mild depression, we know that talking therapy and activities are by far the best way to treat that. And there's definitely a case for the use of antidepressants in young people, but it's definitely on the more severe end when other things have failed. So although they do work, they're not a magic answer to all the problems. And I think it's really important that we look at the root of why a young person is anxious or depressed and try and deal with that first.
Well, Susie Davies, thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much.